There are days when everything moves in a familiar rhythm. Work, friends, conversations that repeat themselves like the road you drive every morning without even thinking. Your emotions feel the same way, resting in a space that feels just safe enough. And then, one afternoon, something shifts. Not a loud sound, not a dramatic event, just a glance that lingers a few seconds longer, as if the person across from you is weighing something you haven't quite named yet. A message arrives right as you set your phone down, almost as if they sensed you were a little more open than usual. Scorpio rarely overlooks details like that, not because you're suspicious, but because you're sensitive to the smallest change in the atmosphere. You can walk into a room and feel that something has shifted, even when no one has said a word. It's like standing beside a still lake. One tiny ripple is enough to tell you a stone has just touched the water. Maybe the other person didn't mean to disturb anything, but their presence makes you pause. You start noticing the way they fall silent, the way they seem to appear at the exact moment you feel most vulnerable. You don't rush to label it. You simply take half a step back and observe. Sometimes, unmasking doesn't begin with staring someone else down. It begins with realizing that the water inside you is no longer completely still. You might ask yourself, am I drawn in, or am I on guard? Am I curious, or am I protecting something deeper? Scorpio carries a thick outer shell, not to shut the world out, but to guard the softest part within. When someone steps into that inner space, even gently, your emotions naturally begin to shift. It's like the house you've lived in for years. Everything sits exactly where it belongs. And then someone stands at the door. They don't knock hard, they don't push. They just stand there, long enough for you to realize you're deciding whether to open it or not. Maybe they're carrying sincere care. Maybe they're trying to move a little deeper into your world. There's no need to answer that right away. What matters more is the moment you notice that you're paying attention. You listen more closely to the words they choose. You notice where their eyes rest. You feel a thin thread being pulled, very gently, but enough that you can't ignore it. In everyday life, many people overlook these subtle shifts. But for Scorpio, they're like the yellow light at an intersection. Not a signal to panic, a signal to slow down, so you can see more clearly. Maybe this presence is a doorway into something new, or maybe it's a mirror reflecting something you're not quite ready to face. Whatever it is, that moment when the water begins to ripple carries a quiet message. Beneath the surface that once seemed steady, your feelings are still alive, still listening. And maybe the most important thing to explore isn't the other person's intention at all, but the way you experience that shift inside yourself. The water may not be calm again just yet, but sometimes those small ripples are what remind you that your heart is still capable of being moved. And once you recognize that, everything begins to slow down in its own quiet way. Not slow because you're afraid, slow so you can feel. Scorpio doesn't rush forward, but you don't turn away right away either. You stand somewhere in between, like someone listening to the wind slipping through a crack in the door, trying to tell whether it's just a passing breeze or the first sign of a season changing. Some people enter our lives with noise, others barely set foot inside, just enough to make the ground within you tremble slightly. Scorpio is familiar with that subtle trembling. Not because you're always searching for mystery, but because you understand that what truly matters rarely arrives with drums and bright lights. Their silence doesn't fully reassure you, but it doesn't make you retreat either. It feels like the pause between two notes in a song. If you listen closely enough, you can sense whether it's a necessary breath or a silence covering something that hasn't been said. In everyday life, there are moments so small, only the sensitive ones catch them. A question asked, but not followed all the way through. A compliment delivered half a beat too late. An eye contact that lingers just a little deeper than the surface of the conversation. Those details aren't automatically good or bad. They're simply pieces, waiting to be placed where they belong. Scorpio tends not to accept half-finished pictures. You may smile, you may keep the conversation flowing as usual, but inside, there's a quiet current moving, not to accuse anyone, just to understand what you're actually feeling. Sometimes you wonder, am I reading too much into this? And then your intuition gently whispers, something isn't fully aligned. When that intuition isn't loud, it doesn't shout warnings. It's more like a small lamp turning on in a dark room, just enough light to see the outline of things. You don't need to switch on every light. You only need enough to avoid stumbling. Maybe the other person is carrying a story of their own, a hesitation that belongs to them. Maybe they're also deciding whether you are a safe place to open up. When two cautious hearts meet, the air can grow heavy, like the stillness before rain. Quiet, but charged. Scorpio understands that atmosphere. You've been the silent one before. You've hidden more than you revealed. So when you encounter that same silence in someone else, you feel both empathy and caution. You know silence can mean depth, and you also know it can be a curtain. Instead of pulling that curtain down too quickly, so you step back. You watch how they respond when you don't fill the space with more information. You notice whether they stay patient or whether they try to press further. That's not a game. It's how you protect your heart. Some people drift away when they realize you don't open easily. Others remain long enough for you to sense consistency in small actions. And sometimes, consistency speaks louder than promises ever could. Through all of this, what changes the most may not be them. It may be you. You begin to see just how sensitive you truly are. You begin to recognize the vulnerable spaces you once believed were sealed shut. That inner radar isn't there to make you doubt everything. It's there to remind you that your feelings matter. When a new presence captures your attention, it isn't random. It's a signal, not necessarily about them, but about something stirring within you. And maybe the journey of unmasking isn't only directed outward. Maybe it's the quiet practice of learning to trust your own perception, enough that you don't get carried away by intentions you haven't fully understood yet. And once you're no longer being carried away unconsciously, you begin to notice that the disturbance isn't coming from the outside as much as you first thought. It's rising from within, from places you once believed were steady. What's interesting isn't so much the person stepping in, but the quiet, unmistakable reaction inside your own chest. Something feels slightly off its usual orbit. You still go to work, you still talk, you still laugh the way you always have. But at night, your mind doesn't slip into sleep as easily. While you replay a sentence, a pause, a look, you wonder why those small details linger. A new presence can be like a small stone dropped into a still lake. It doesn't splash dramatically. It doesn't break the surface apart. It simply creates ripples that move outward, touching emotional shores you once thought had dried up long ago. And when those ripples reach those edges, you begin to see old cracks, longings you never quite named. Maybe they brushed against the memory without meaning to. Maybe they stirred a feeling that belonged to another chapter of your life, the feeling of being seen, of being chosen, or on the other side, the feeling of being examined, tested, measured. Whatever it is, it makes you pause. Scorpio isn't afraid of truth, but you are sensitive to change. And when your internal balance shifts, even slightly, you feel it immediately. Like someone who has lived in a quiet house for years, a single creak in the floor at midnight is enough to wake you. So you start observing yourself more closely. Why did that comment land so deeply? Why did your chest tighten when they stepped back? Why are you waiting for a message, even after telling yourself you wouldn't? These questions aren't accusations. They're like lamps you switch on inside your own inner room. You walk slowly through your emotions, touching each one carefully, asking which part is genuinely moved and which part might simply be echoing an old fear. There are moments when you realize what unsettles you isn't their intention. It's the possibility that you could open up again. Opening up always carries risk. And Scorpio knows that. You've walked uneven roads before. You understand that connection can bring warmth, and it can also leave deep impressions. So when balance shifts, you don't panic. You become quieter, quiet enough to hear your own heartbeat, quiet enough to tell the difference between intuition and fear. They can feel almost identical at first, but intuition tends to carry a soft clarity. Fear usually rushes. You begin to notice how you enter their space. You speak a little less. You observe a little more, not to test them, but to see whether their presence keeps a steady rhythm or fades like passing wind. And in that process, something subtle happens. You learn to look directly at your own vulnerability, without denial, without judgment, simply acknowledging that when someone's presence unsettles you, it means parts of you are still alive, still unfinished, still capable of feeling deeply. Maybe they're not carrying anything complicated at all. Maybe they're just crossing paths with you for a brief stretch of road, but that crossing is enough to make you re-examine the structure of your own emotions. Balance isn't always stillness. Sometimes it's the ability to adjust after the rhythm shifts. And when you notice yourself adjusting, resetting your boundaries, steadying your pulse, you're also recognizing your own worth more clearly. The disturbance stops feeling like a threat. It becomes a reminder that your heart is still alive, still responsive to the world. And maybe the deepest moment here isn't about exposing someone else's hidden motives at all. It's about having the courage to unmask your own true feelings. Yeah, and once you dare to look directly at that feeling, the other person's silence begins to feel less threatening. It's no longer a wall. It's more like a thin curtain. You may not see clearly what's behind it, but you know you have the right to stand still and observe instead of rushing to pull it aside. Silence carries layers. Some people grow quiet because they're weighing their words. Some fall silent because they're unsure whether to step forward or step back. And some pauses hold a certain caution, as if they're watching to see how you respond to the empty space between you. Scorpio isn't unfamiliar with those layers. You're used to reading the air in a room, not just the words being spoken. Sometimes what isn't said holds more weight than a long conversation ever could. What you notice the slight shift in their breathing, the way they sidestep a topic, the way their gaze lingers just long enough, but not too long. And yet, instead of dissecting every detail right away, you choose to sit with your own feeling, like brewing a cup of tea. You don't drink it the second the water boils. You wait. You let the heat soften. You allow the flavor to unfold. Clarity sometimes asks for that same patience. There are those who believe unmasking means confronting directly, demanding answers, bringing everything into the light at once. But for Scorpio, unmasking often happens inwardly. You watch for consistency between words and actions. You notice how they move when no one is watching. You pay attention to how they respond when you remain silent instead of filling the space for them. In daily life, this doesn't always look dramatic. It might be a quiet phone call in the evening when you sense they avoided a simple question, or a last-minute change of plans, and the explanation lingers in your mind longer than expected. None of it is enough to draw a conclusion, but it's like small puzzle pieces waiting to see whether they belong in the larger picture. Scorpio is often more patient than people realize. You don't trust easily, but you don't rush into suspicion either. You hold just enough distance to avoid being swept away by passing emotion. And in that distance, you allow the other person room to reveal themselves, not to catch them in a mistake, just to see whether they are truly who they appear to be. There are moments when you realize their silence isn't hiding anything dark. It may simply reflect their own fear, the same way you once stayed quiet to protect yourself. That recognition softens your caution. You understand that no one enters something new without carrying a little hesitation. And yet, there are times when intuition gently whispers that something feels slightly off. Nothing dramatic, just a subtle shift in rhythm. You don't have to argue with that feeling. You only need to acknowledge it, to admit that while they are silent, you are listening very carefully. In this context, unmasking isn't about tearing off a disguise in front of a crowd. It's more like standing before a mirror and asking yourself, what am I expecting from this presence? Am I seeking connection or testing my own readiness? When you begin to answer those questions honestly, the other person's intentions lose some of their power over you. Maybe they're carrying unspoken things. Maybe they're trying to move closer without making you uncomfortable. Or maybe they're simply crossing your path for a while, leaving a few footprints before turning in another direction. Whatever unfolds, what matters most may be this. You no longer fear silence. You don't rush to fill it with assumptions. You let it exist as open space. And within that space, you begin to trust your own rhythm a little more. When you're calm enough not to overreact, gentle enough not to shut the door too quickly, and clear-minded enough to sense what truly fits, silence stops being a threat. It becomes part of the discovery. And maybe, behind those quiet pauses, there isn't only someone else's hidden intention, but an invitation to understand more deeply how you love, how you protect, and how you decide who is allowed to step into the most private space of your world. That space isn't visible to everyone. It's like a small room at the end of a hallway, where you keep the things you rarely say out loud, dreams that haven't fully formed into words, fears that once made you hesitate, memories that still hum softly beneath the surface, even after time has passed. Some people enter your life to gently light up a dark corner. Their presence feels like a small lamp switched on in that room. The light isn't harsh. It doesn't blind you, but it's enough to help you see what you once avoided. You don't feel invaded. If anything, you feel a little lighter, as if someone is sitting beside you in silence without demanding anything in return. And then there are others who step in only to see whether the door is locked. They touch the handle. They push lightly. They step back. Then they try again. It's not always that they want to understand you. Sometimes they just want to see how far they can go. The difference isn't always in what they say. It's in how you feel when you're near them. Do you open naturally, or do you find yourself guarding, almost without realizing it? The issue isn't entirely about them. It's about how you experience your own boundaries. Boundaries aren't towering walls meant to keep everyone out. They're more like a wooden fence around a garden. You can open the gate for someone, but you still know the garden belongs to you. Scorpio carries strength in a quiet way, not loud strength. Depth. You can endure things others don't see. You can smile while something inside you is shifting. And because your depth runs deep, your vulnerability does too. When someone touches that vulnerable part, your first instinct is often to assess. You analyze small gestures, subtle shifts in tone. You ask yourself, am I seeing this clearly, or am I reacting from an old pattern? Sometimes you even question your own feelings, as if your heart needs more evidence before it's allowed to trust. But knowing where you're vulnerable is its own kind of strength. It's like someone who knows exactly where the floorboards are fragile, so they don't place too much weight there. You don't deny your sensitivity. You simply learn where to hold it carefully. In everyday life, this can look very simple. You decline an invitation one evening because something in you isn't ready. You wait before replying to a message because you want to hear your own feeling first. These small choices aren't about controlling anyone. They're about not moving faster than your heart can follow. Maybe the other person understands, maybe they don't. Their reaction reveals something too. Someone who genuinely wants to enter your private space rarely rushes. They wait. They respect your rhythm, like someone who walks slowly into a dark room so they don't startle you. And at some point, you begin to realize that boundaries aren't only there to keep people out. They're there to remind you that you have the right to choose, the right to open the door, the right to close it. The right to sit with your feelings a little longer before deciding. When you understand that, it stops feeling like a test. You're simply living in alignment with your own heartbeat. Vulnerability no longer feels like something to hide. It becomes the most honest part of you, the part that allows you to feel deeply and love more fully. And maybe, In learning to protect your boundaries, you're also learning when to soften. Not everyone who steps in is carrying complicated intentions. Some are simply looking for a quiet place to set down their emotional backpack for a while. Among all those possibilities, what remains is your choice. Not a choice driven by fear, but one shaped by a growing understanding of yourself. And when you choose with both clarity and gentleness, your private space is no longer a fortress. It becomes a place only those who truly value it are able to enter. And once you begin to see that space in this way, everything feels a little lighter. You're no longer standing guard all the time. You no longer feel the need to throw the door wide open just to prove you're not afraid. You simply stand there, calm, steady, fully aware of the value of what you're protecting. Maybe this person carries a gentle shift with them. Maybe they're only passing through, like a breeze that lingers for a moment and then continues on its own path. Not every encounter is meant to become something monumental. Sometimes, someone's presence is enough to remind you that your heart still knows how to respond, still knows how to ask questions, still knows how to pause before opening. Scorpio doesn't have to rush to remove anyone's mask. When you understand your own rhythm, you're less likely to be pulled blindly into someone else's mystery. You listen, you observe, you allow time to do its quiet work. Some things, with enough patience, reveal themselves without being forced. And in that process, you begin to understand more clearly how you respond to disruption. Are you protecting an old wound? Or are you learning to love in a more grounded way? Those questions don't demand immediate answers. They can simply rest there, like small stones placed gently along the edge of your thoughts. Perhaps what matters most isn't what the other person intends. What's more telling is how you chose to move. You chose to slow down instead of rushing forward. You chose to listen instead of assuming. You chose to honor your feelings instead of dismissing them. Sometimes, or unmasking, doesn't lead to a bright, clear truth like a light snapping on in a dark room. Sometimes it feels more like sunset, colors blending quietly across the sky, no sharp line between day and night. You simply sense that you're standing at a threshold, where something old and something new touch for a moment. The one who stepped in quietly may be carrying something meant for you, or they may simply be a mirror, reflecting a deeper layer of yourself. And when you're calm enough to look into that mirror without turning away, you grow, even if only a little. Have you ever wondered when someone unsettles you, whether what occupies your thoughts most is truly them, or the unnamed feelings already living inside you? The story may pause here, but the feeling remains, like the lingering note at the end of a slow song. And perhaps in that quiet space, you'll notice a small, almost invisible smile forming just for yourself.